Well, good morning, everyone. It is the very last Tuesday in May of 2014. Welcome to May 27th, actually. And glad to be here today. It's going to be an awesome day. The sun is out, it's supposed to be beautiful, and I have one of my favorite authors of all time with us both in the morning and at night. So he'll be here to wake you up and put you to bed. So let's get started because we have a lot to talk about. A couple things, just a heads up, those of you traveling possibly down through Mexico or Southern California, there is possibility for some rough weather off the coast in the Pacific side, Midwest, tornado possibility any freaking time. We've seen these little storms pop up, especially around South Dakota, North Dakota. Recently took out some oil field workers yesterday, so our hearts and prayers go out to them. Mudslides through Colorado. And it's always time to get ready for hurricane season. So we did drop a PDF that you can download on our Private Chicks Pink page. But those of you through the Midwest, heads up, midweek. So make sure that you're ready for that at any time. So without much ado, because we've got some exciting things happening today with, welcome back to the show, G. Michael Hoff. How are you today?
Good, Lori. How are you doing?
Good. It's really early there for you this morning.
Yeah, I like the evening show better.
I'm sure. For you, it's what, 8 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What is it there, about 5?
It's 5 a.m. right now, yeah.
Oh, it's good to see the sunrise once in a while.
It is. I love your show. That's why I'm willing to get up at the crack of dawn.
Well, you've been on our show now for, I believe, if not a year ago, with your first book. It's been pretty darn close.
Yeah, it has been, hasn't it? It's almost been at 1 year anniversary since you first had me on to talk about the end.
Yeah, the end is actually the beginning, which is kind of cool. But you got me hooked with that book, and it's been nothing but biting nails and throwing things ever since then. So today is part 3 of the New World series called Sanctuary. It goes live today, correct? I pre-ordered mine months ago.
That's correct. Today is the release day for Sanctuary, book 3 in the New World series.
And how many books are you going to have in the series total?
The series for the New World will have a total of 7 books.
Awesome. So we're about almost midway through. Little last.
Yeah, it's kind of the best way to describe Sanctuary is kind of it's the happy middle ground. I use the word happy because it's actually one of the happier, more hopeful books in the series.
I posted a couple of days ago on my personal Facebook wall that I'm going to need Valiant by Christmas. So if anybody out there is listening, feel free to send that. And that was totally about G. Michael's books. Okay, just so everybody knows, I absolutely love the series. I think it's well written. I think that it allows people to dive into a post-apocalyptic world without any of the hardships now to get them to open up to it. What do I hate about it? Even as much as I do this, and look at all of the downside to it and try and learn from what others have gone through, say in, Venezuela or Crete or Greece or France or, any time we've had any kind of downgrade situation. Yours is really pulling on my heartstrings. But it's made me stop and look about, even personal relationships that I have with people. I read the second book, and my son got some really good quality time, I can tell you that. The third book, I looked at my relationship with my husband a little differently, I will admit. So, but does it need to happen? It's like us playing Conflicted on Tuesday nights, You need to start thinking about this stuff, and you really need to, put plans together or have conversations with people that you love about what's going on in the world. Now, your books are wrapped around an EMP event.
Correct.
And one spin that you've put in yours is the main character, his brother, is in the military. And while this EMP goes off, and it talks about, his inner demons dealing with being away from the U.S. and having family here and working through, what he feels he should do. How was that to write for you?
Sebastian's character?
Yeah.
I absolutely had to have a character like that was in that particular situation, because I think it's always been something that has been left out in other books, and that is, if you have an event like that's apocalyptic, that's on such a large scale, that's going to have such a large effect, what happens to our fighting men and women that are overseas? Because then their allegiances become conflicted, not to overuse that word. They're overseas. We project our forces to go overseas to do things for us, and their main purpose is to defend the homeland. But what happens when the homeland is actually under siege itself? And then they have to decide, what are they going to do about that? How are they going to get home? What's going to happen? And it really puts them in a very, very tough situation that Americans and American fighting men and women have had to deal with since the American Civil War, where the actual home front, your actual families, are in threat of their lives. And so I absolutely had to pose that question, because I think there would be it'd be very, very difficult. And I think you would start to see, right then, the potential of forces breaking down.
And you have a military background. Can you enlighten everyone? Because you have some kahunas to talk about this.
Yeah, I did 6 years in the Marine Corps, and I'm a combat veteran. So, knowing, being a Marine and serving with men and fighting, we all talk about different things. We all, the thing is that there's always this picture that's painted of soldiers or service people that were kind of robotic, and that we will only salute and just go up that hill and do what we need to. Of course we will follow orders, but it's not that we don't sit in our own minds and question the orders that are given to us at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot in the civilian population that just think that we'll do whatever we're told, and that's not necessarily the case, because there's varying different reasons why we join the service. I always say there's three main reasons that people join, but and they're not always about the country. People have some very selfish reasons for why they join the service. And it's not, so therefore then it's not a foregone conclusion that if an order comes down for them to do something and their home front truly is under threat, like I pose in the book, that there wouldn't be people that would just up and leave.
Yeah, well, those of us civilians have huge concerns. We've talked about it multiple times. If something would happen here, would our military stand behind us, or would they turn against us? And that, just not military, we're talking any law enforcement out there. And I think a lot of us, it concerns us. It really does. But your book puts a human person behind that. And that's really nice to see, as opposed to a lot of the other stuff out there. And I can imagine that was probably very thought-provoking to write him into that and take him in that direction, because it's something we're programmed against.
Well, yeah, and what's interesting is that where he's conflicted, if people haven't read any of the series at all, is that the unit itself mutinies against the orders of the new president, and then he essentially then turns away from even his unit and what their new mission has been given by the colonel of that battalion. So, not only is the colonel, not abiding by his orders or by the new president's orders, then Sebastian isn't abiding by anyone's orders, because his main concern now is just to get home. And he, obviously, I don't want to give too much away, but he ends up in his own particular situations that are tough.
Well, the other thing that I like about your book, we're going to move away from Sebastian, is the fact that the main character, lives in a subdivision in San Diego and deals with life immediately after the EMP, still surviving in place, bugging in, because unlike other books out there, he doesn't get handed everything that he needs to him. He has to deal with what's around him. And you have, one thing I love about your books, you put a lot of great information in there about what you can do and how he went about surviving. And if, people out there are reading this, they can start to put their own bug-in plan together based off of what you've written in there.
Yeah, I wanted to also, when I first started the series, wanted to have the character not be completely prepared. Mm-hmm. If you look at the major population, they're not. I mean, he has enough, some resources here and there, but the main thing he has, and this is what we've always talked about, from a living a prepared lifestyle, is his mindset, is that when anything happens, he's ready to do what's necessary to get things done.
Do you think that's going to be one of the biggest downfalls, is the hesitation?
Absolutely. Hesitation is yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing when anything ever happens is how quickly you can respond to it. Because
the bad guys are already living in that reality. Most of us are not.
Yeah, and they're not hesitant about doing what they feel is necessary for their own well-being.
Well, you do bring that to the forefront through all of the books, every single one of them so far.
I think it's really key for people to the response time. And the reason, I know some people have been critical. Well, the character should have just left. Well, yeah, of course he should have. Would I have just left? Yes. But I'm writing a book that needs to create drama. That needs to create. It's interesting. I mean, here's the thing. If it was, I've had some in the prepper community, who say the book should have been like this. Well, then the book would have been 20 pages and been over. If he bugs out, there's bug out location, everything's happy and no one dies. Okay, then the book's over 25 pages. The thing is, I'm writing a book that's entertainment. I'm writing a book that puts characters in situations that are challenging and tough. And hence that's why he decides to stay and bug in. And then there's all the challenges by doing that. And it's also, he's in a suburban area that's outside one of the largest cities in the United States. And what happens to that city as it deteriorates? And by the way, I think urban centers will be the ones that go to hell much faster than, say, people that live in the country.
Why?
One, you just have just a lot more people, and most urban dwellers are not prepared. They're not.
And the lines of being the supply lines are easily detachable from them.
Yeah, so you have people. You have a mass of people that aren't prepared. You have the supply lines, and it's just what little resources there are. There's just millions of people that are going to be fighting for them. Yeah. And what gets people into a panic is that they realize they aren't prepared, and that's what causes panic.
Well, your characters are well written, and you get attached to them very easily as you're going through your series. And your last book, Sanctuary, really pulled on my heartstrings with the main character and his spouse. And not many books have both the main character and his spouse become almost main characters. What made you choose to go that route?
With Samantha also being a main character, or the direction that it's going in Sanctuary?
With Gordon and Samantha.
Well, because I think if you ever do have, I think if the protagonist has a spouse, that's the spouse is also, and I do pull this from my own personal life, is that the spouse is also kind of equal in a lot of ways, and when you have a family and they're separated, of course, then those characters are both playing equal roles in a lot of ways. And I also wanted to give women a character to kind of cheer for at the same time. Not that women can't cheer for a male protagonist.
No, there is very few female main characters out there in this type of post-apocalyptic books out there. So that's nice to see. And there are, don't get me wrong, but usually they're ditzy and they're weak, and you show a different side to that. And it was nice to see.
Yeah, it's because I think a lot of apocalyptic is dominated by male writers, and I think that that definitely tends to happen. I think there's absolutely can women be Can women be dominant and strong in this kind of world? Of course they could. And I think a lot of women will rise to the occasion if something happens at the same time. So, Samantha is one of those characters that she's a very strong woman. She's a very capable woman. If you were to meet her, meet her before, an event like this, I mean, she doesn't come across as super tough if you were to meet her character before, but then when this happens, she definitely knows what needs to be done at the same time too, and gets things done. And when anyone's messing with her little cubs, she's willing to, as you read in Sanctuary, she's willing to go all out.
Yeah. And it was nice to see, because at the beginning, the first book, the end, she's just any kind of, mom out there. Not necessarily, into this kind of thing. So it's nice to see her mindset change and become, the strong female mama bear, like you said, that she becomes. Because I think a lot of my thing is, usually in a downgrade situation, the women seem to lag way behind when it comes to picking up the pace and developing that mindset that you referred to earlier, to the point they get killed or they get raped or, more harm comes to them. Even in, we've read about the rape reports in Katrina. Rape increased 30% just overnight because women choose to allow men to take care of them. And they think that as long as, they're around, that they're going to be well protected. So why even bother taking care of yourself? So, and I think that's one reality that women really, really need to wake up to, is that you don't always have your husband, your father, your brother, your uncle, your son around to protect you. And it's our responsibility to do that for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better than that. It's very true. I mean, her character is evolving as these things are evolving, and she's evolving in the right direction. Especially, and that's one of the reasons I have the main character, Gordon, go off, is to then evolve and create Samantha into something that's much bigger than she was in the first book.
Yeah, and
because those are things that could happen, by the way. And that's something too you need to think in as you're living, kind of preparing for anything that could happen. I think that sometimes women think their husbands might be there, even though they're still prepared. They still are, but that may not be the case. So they could go out and never come back. Yeah,
and we're groomed to be that way. Even it's better now, but if you go back and you look through my parents, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, even into the 80s. It's always been, the responsibility of the male to be the man of the house, and that's changing, and it needs to change a lot faster. But I think that's very important, and I thank you greatly for writing her character and making her a strong woman towards the end, specifically with everything that's going on in the book. Same with our kids. Same way with our kids. Do we even have conversations with our children about this kind of stuff?
Yeah, and kids, I think in a post-grid situation, that kids will be the ones that'll actually adapt faster than adults.
Oh, yeah.
And they've done studies on that, and kids will be the ones that really step up. But also, they'll evolve and can become very brutal at the same time. Children would be a very interesting thing to see. You think kids would be these innocent things, but kids they're more hardwired for self-preservation, and they haven't, and depending on their age, necessarily haven't yet developed empathy and ways of looking at things. And so some kids can be very, very brutal and do horrible things that we as adults would look at and be horrified by in situations like that I pose in the book.
Do you think that the video games that are out there have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I do. I think, whenever it's a form of desensitizing them, of course.
But we'll let them play video games, but we won't talk to them about situations like this.
Because I think we still think that it's just a game. And that's, it is silly, right? It's to sit down and talk about, I know it was when we had just had some fires out in Southern California, and, my girls are young though, they're 4 and 6, but still wanted to talk to them a little bit about it, and we were watching stuff on the news, and then we eventually would turn it off, because then they started asking lots of questions. And of course we want to answer them, but at the same time we don't want to freak them out. We want to make sure that we can guide that conversation so they have an understanding, and not have them be fearful, but have them be aware. If that it's better to be aware, and then there's too much. And I think that the video games, it's a different, especially the shooter games. It definitely desensitizes them.
Yeah.
And they're becoming very, very realistic.
Well, how many kids are going to be on their own trying to survive after some kind of EMP? Quite a few of them, probably.
Oh, absolutely. Of course there will be. Yeah.
So better to teach them now, at least the little things, and start building them up. When do you think, in your opinion, what's the earliest stage you think you can start involving kids in self-sufficiency, in survival?
I think 5 and 6.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think anything beyond that, they're not going to retain anyways.
Yeah, and the thing is, the 5 and 6 also depends on by the child too. Obviously, some children are just a little bit more mature at 5 than others. So you kind of have to gauge it per child. But I think you can start if your child has the maturity to start comprehending and processing what you're asking them to do. Yeah, 5 can definitely be an age to do that.
And what do you think? What kind of activities would you start involving your kids in?
Well, you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, as far as showing them how to just, the equipment that needs to be used and how to use it. And that can all just be done by just going camping, taking your bug out bag and everything else, and going out and just going camping and showing them how to just put things together. To even shooting. I know that's always the question that I think it can freak out some people, but and I know I first started shooting a .22 caliber Winchester lever action rifle when I was 5 years old.
Yeah, we bought our son one when he turned 1. It was his very first birthday present. So doesn't mean he was shooting it when he was 1, but I think when you learn respect of the firearm, the earlier, the better. Quite honestly, because then it doesn't become a vicious tool later on.
Well, that speaking of firearms, it goes to the point where I think that in some regards there really aren't people that are anti-gun. You're either pro-gun or you're afraid of guns.
Yeah, and most women that I teach that are scared to death or that don't like firearms, it's because they don't understand them. They don't have the knowledge behind it. And once they do that, once I sit down and rip the thing apart and they understand how it functions, and then that's when they can't get enough of it. But that's a lot of fear comes from lack of knowledge, and the more you can build up that knowledge, the less fear you're going to have in life. That's like with preparedness. Oh my goodness, there's tornadoes, but if you're ready, it's like, well, we're ready for this. It is what it is.
You're right. And then what you don't panic. And that's where you can follow the chain of emotional response to anything, with anything that happens. If someone who's prepared, and that's where then the prepared-minded individual that's why the mindset is the most critical thing. So say you get in an accident, it's a car accident. It's really not too much you're going to be able to do initially with being a prepared person. Like your bug out bag in the back of your car is not going to do any good when someone just, slams in the side and T-bones you at an intersection. But it's your mindset. If you haven't been injured, you'll get out of the car. If you're a person that doesn't panic and you handle situations, you'll look at it and start reacting in a very positive way.
Yeah.
But then there are some people, and they can have all the gear in the world, they can be in their car, and their car gets in an accident, and they freak out because now the real world is literally smashed into them. And do they have the mental ability to deal with it?
Yeah.
And that's where mindset is critical.
A good friend of mine told me a long time ago, what happens if you get shot? You're just shot. A lot of people live after that. You just got to keep functioning, got to keep moving through it. You need to still defend yourself because all you are is shot. You're not dead. You're just shot. You know,
that's a very good point. I mean, if you ever seen the movie Lone Survivor, or if read the book, Marcus Luttrell's book, how many rounds do those guys take?
Yeah. So
they were shot all over.
Mindset.
And they just kept moving. It's all mindset. They were never going to quit. They were not surrendering. They were determined not to die.
Yeah.
And so, you can be shot numerous times. Obviously, unless it's a lethal shot to the head, but you can be shot all over and still be moving.
Yeah. I think I get asked a lot, how do you start preparing? What do you do? And, the typical answer is, well, you need to get water, you need to get food. No, in my opinion, mindset is the number one. If you're choosing not to live through whatever event, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to die anyway. So if you're determined that you're going to live through it, there's a damn good chance that you're going to. And second, knowledge. Those are the top two. Not water, not food, nothing else. Your mindset and knowledge probably have to come first and second. All right. So, question in the chat room. Today your book went live to purchase in a plethora of avenues. So you're on Amazon, where else are you at?
The book can be purchased, probably over a dozen different online retailers. You can go to Walmart, Target, Hastings, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, and you can purchase the download audio version or a physical version. It's also available in any Barnes & Noble stores, Hastings stores. It'll be in airport bookstores as well. But today you can walk into a Barnes & Noble. It should be out front. Awesome.
Now, somebody was asking once they get it and they read it, how to do a review on it I believe they were using Amazon.
So if you go, so that's a great question. If you go on Amazon.com, just as you scroll down on the product page, there's always a little link that where it has a review section. Just click on that if you want to make a review. There's always a button right there on the product page.
Awesome.
And the question might refer to that I have a giveaway I am doing.
Oh, what is that?
I have 2 iPod shuffles I'm giving away.
Well, how do we get more information about it, and how do you join?
So the thing is, in order, I have 2. I'm going to be randomly giving 2 iPod shuffles away to 2 people that make reviews. To be the first 100 reviewers. The first 100 reviewers for Sanctuary, I will randomly pick out, and they will receive an iPod shuffle.
Is that on Amazon?
Yeah, it'll be on Amazon. To do a review on Amazon.com for the book, I will once I hit 100 reviews, I'll pick 2 of those people, and then they get iPod shuffles. It's wonderful.
Awesome.
I do ask that they send me an email at jeff@gmichaelhoff.com. Let me know that their review is up there.
Okay, now hang on a minute. When you say Jeff, you spell your Jeff.
Yes, Geoff. Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody's not sending it to Jeff. Oh, look, Vince dropped the information in the chat room, so thank you, Vince, for that.
Vince is on top of this. Look at him.
Yeah. Now, along with the book itself, something that really, really excites me is that you have, with your posse, have created an entire deck of conflicted cards wrapped around your book series so far.
Yeah, and that releases today too. That's something else exciting that's happening. I work with the guys over at Survival Logics, and we put together, more like they did, a deck of cards that are based on 2 of the books, The End and The Long Road. It's not premature, but I could say there'll be more decks that'll come as more books are released.
I think JD was talking about he does 1 deck per 2 books seems to be his train of thought, but it's an awesome looking deck that you have. And I was going through the questions and whatnot, and we'll be playing later tonight with your deck.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so if everybody comes back at 11 p.m. tonight, chat room will be hopping. That's 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be playing G. Michael's deck. Based off of his book. So those of you that have already read it, and it looks like a majority of the people in the chat room already have, which is good because we're all, anxiously awaiting Sanctuary to come out. But what are the questions in your deck? I have abused a little bit. over the last week. But one of your train of thought was if Washington D.C. was obliterated and wiped off the planet, and you could rebuild the Capitol anywhere in the United States, where would you do it?
You're asking me this question?
Yeah, I'm asking you this question.
God, well, there's a lot of different factors. If it's like the exact same post-grid scenario that I paint?
Yeah. Yep, based off of your book. And not necessarily where you put it in the book, but if you had to choose, where would you put it?
Houston would be a good location.
Why?
I would put it, I'll take a little step back. I like Houston, Texas as a location. Or even Galveston, somewhere in between. Or even go back and say, Seattle, Washington. I like port cities because you have a post grid. The quickest way to get your city back up and running is you're going to be more than likely, you should have a city that has infrastructure in place to a certain extent that it can, but also a city that can be managed well enough, and hopefully it hasn't completely collapsed too bad. I mean, all of them will have collapsed to a certain extent, but hopefully one that can be managed. The smaller the city, the better. I obviously picked in the book, it was Portland, and I think it's also another good location, but, anywhere that has a large port as well as an airport, an airfield, and multiple ones that you can bring stuff in. Because if also allies are helping us and sending in things to help repair things and get our infrastructure back up and running, you'll want a city that can receive both via ship and aircraft.
Yeah, I like that idea too. The only concern I had about somebody else brought up Texas. I think Geek Prepper did, and I could be wrong there, but my concerns would be weather related because of the hurricane in the Gulf, and the many of those that there are. And what do you think about any kind of foreign troop movement coming over the border in Texas?
It's definitely a possibility. Sure. Yeah. That's why then I started thinking again and went back to, and then thought about Seattle as a location. You know, you definitely, any of the border states will have to be concerned with, people like I pose in the book coming across the border and taking advantage of our situation. I think we'd have to be concerned. I don't think we'd have that same concern looking at our northern border with Canada, than we would have looking down to our southern border with Mexico.
Yeah, in Seattle, you don't think there's a disadvantage, even while Washington now is on the East Coast, you don't think there's a disadvantage having it so far removed from the rest of the country?
No. I don't know if you could put it in the middle of the country if you wanted to. I think that'd be very difficult. I think a port city, I think you would need a port to bring materials in. Okay.
What do you think?
Of course you could bring them in and then you could obviously start shipping. But I just think that it goes back that things kind of take a step back in time, even like they did when we had the founding of the nation. You know, ports were very, very critical and very important for bringing materials in, and I think you would want to have that.
What about an area up around, say, Cleveland? You've got the Great Lakes.
I don't like any of the east at all, just for the fact you have a lot of potential issues with nuclear power plants and generation plants like that.
Okay.
I even pose that in the books. I mean, obviously there are SCRAM systems in place that will help prevent meltdowns. It's not necessarily the plants themselves you have to be concerned about. It's the containment for the spent rods that are the issue with a lot of nuclear power plants. If you go on the NRC's website and you take a look at the location of nuclear power generation plants, as well as where they're keeping spent rods, it's everything east of the Mississippi. It could be a hot zone.
So we should move real fast. Is that what you're saying?
Seriously, really take a look at a map from the national from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC's website. It's crazy how many nuclear power plants are east of the Mississippi.
Oh, there's quite a few. And quite honestly, when I was we went to Utah last year, traveling across the Great Basin of the Rocky Mountains, it's like there's nobody up here. This would be a great place to be. I would contemplate moving up there if I could figure out how to grow tomatoes and stuff. But plus that and altitude sickness that seemed to like me quite well.
Oh, you're susceptible to that.
Yeah, found out the hard way. Never been out there. And but Eddie made fun of me as we were going up through Colorado and up through Wyoming. I'm like, I'm not really feeling well right now. And he's like, oh, what's wrong with you? And on the way back, we came down through the southern route, down into Denver in that area. And he's like, I'm not really feeling well. And I just laughed. It's like, now you know how I felt. So by then I'd figured out what was going on, and it was an easy fix.
So where would you put us today? I want to put the question back to you. That's a good question. And by the way, this is one we should ask tonight.
Yeah, we should. I don't know. Quite honestly, I'm up in arms about where we should put. There's downfalls and positive things about a multitude of places. For some reason, we never talk about Denver or Colorado at all. And we already have a good bit of infrastructure already built there. Not necessarily for the good of mankind, but it is there already. So maybe someplace in that area.
Are you talking about Denver International Airport?
Oh, whatever,
Are you talking about the subterranean city that's below DIA?
Yeah, the massive tunnels and whatnot. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we could potentially burrow into the side of the mountain. Oh my goodness, maybe they already have. I would be shocked.
Well, they have. It's called Cheyenne Mountain, and it's supposedly interconnected. It's supposed to be actually connected to Denver via a underground train.
Yeah. So if I became president of the United States and I found out all of the shit that's going on out there, I'm sure that would have some kind of sway in my decision. But, I mean, I would look at that area specifically, quite honestly, just because of all the resources that are already there.
Yeah, but are there enough resources there, though, that could get the entire country back online? Or, I mean, are there resources to keep you alive as the president for a long time? Absolutely. And if you didn't care about what happened to the country, it'd be a good place to go hide out.
Yeah. Well, I think we can agree that most of the East Coast is going to be gone.
I think
in one way, shape, or form.
Some issues.
Yeah. And how far that travels east depends on, what the fatality is going to be. So, I don't know. It's a good question. You bring up the port cities and stuff like that, and I understand that, but I'm not sure how I would feel about it. I've seen a lot of the stories and tinfoil hat stories about, the foreign troops in Mexico and how they're ready to, invade the United States. A lot of stuff to consider, and we don't get the whole truth. So, if I became president, once I have the truth for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm actually, and that's why I even have it in the books. As far as, if you have an EMP, depending on the size of the EMP, and obviously I use a super EMP that really makes it just even more devastating to a certain extent. Parts of large swaths, depending on where it's obviously detonated over North America, large swaths of Mexico will also be down. So Mexico itself will be dealing with the outcome of the EMP too. I don't know about I'm not sure about any just massive land armies foreign armies that are just sitting there in barracks ready to roll across the border. I don't necessarily know about that. I think, the biggest concern we would have would be cartels.
Oh yeah.
When you go back and talk about how the criminals are the ones that are always ready to react, and I think cartels already have an infrastructure in place to operate off grid, because that's how they do a lot of their business is the old fashioned way, and so as not to get caught.
Yeah.
So I think the cartels would be ones, and again that's why I have it in the book. So they're ones that react quickly and grow fast. They become a serious threat, as well as gangs.
Yeah, we have a big gang problem going on right now in Indianapolis. I mean, we've had the first shooting at the Speedway, Indianapolis 500 this weekend. And every day I wake up and somebody else has been shot. And those of us on the outskirts are like, we'll just wait it out, and they'll end up killing themselves off, and that'll be the end of it. But it's just not stopping. not stopping at all, which is a huge concern.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the gangs I think would fight one another, but others could become very large and really take advantage of the situation.
What do you think? Because I've talked to IMPD concerning my fears, because I have a lot of people that work in town that I'm concerned about, and talk to them about, where is this coming from? What's going on? And they don't even know. They're so understaffed and overwhelmed that it's unbelievable. So, those people out there, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but any kind of downgrade, don't rely upon the police or any kind of emergency personnel to rescue your ass, because it isn't going to happen. They're going to be overwhelmed, just like everyone else. And don't forget, they have families too that they're going to want to make sure that they're doing good and okay. But the gang situation, how infiltrated within the cities of the United States do you think that is?
As far as the cartel's influence?
Yeah.
I think it definitely exists, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Do you think that's going to be one disadvantage of living in a big city?
Yes, absolutely. I think the cartels are even involved in politics. Whenever you have these propositions that states have put forward to legalize marijuana, they're the ones actually funding a lot of the opposition to that. I mean, there are conservative groups that will be out there that fund opposition, but some of the money that comes funneling into the opposition for legalization of marijuana. And by the way, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying I'm a proponent or an opponent to it. I'm just giving people the facts here. The facts are sources of funds that come in to fund anti-marijuana legalization comes from cartels south of the border. That's a fact.
So they're going to have they're going to have a vested interest in how this country is rebuilt.
Of course they will. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, but at the same time, they'll also be able to have a greater foot in Mexico too, because if parts of Mexico it collapses, they're going to be also in their own backyard trying to clean up and solidify their position down there at the same time before they necessarily come up here. But they already have an influence here. It's in gangs, of course it is.
Well, based upon what your research has done for the book, what do you think on a scale of 1 to 10 of an EMP going off in the United States is? And
on 10 being it absolutely positively happening?
Correct.
I think that
let me say by a foreign country as opposed to a natural.
Oh yeah, I think the natural. Well, man, that could happen. I think a 5.
How susceptible is our power grid to collapsing?
Very easily collapsible.
I know you've done a lot of research.
If you look at it, it's a patchwork of different generation stations and that's what it is. It's a very loose patchwork of stuff. It doesn't take much. I mean, we had a blackout here in San Diego back in 2009, and that literally was one guy in Tucson flipped the wrong switch, and it knocked out power from that relay station over in Tucson. All of Southern California was out.
So why couldn't they just flip it back on?
It just doesn't work that way, apparently. What he did, shut it all down. One guy. Wow. One worker went out to a remote site, and accidentally turned off the power. And an EMP, the main damages it has is it destroys these large transformers that are coming from the power generation stations. Once those are down, we don't have them in supply to replace them. We don't have those parts to fix those in the United States. We tend to have those manufactured overseas and then shipped over. And so in a perfect world, once those go down, it would take 6 months at the minimum to get some of those into country to start repairing.
And they would focus on more populated areas, so the capital of the city would be first in line, I'm sure. Who
knows? Obviously everything falls down to continuity of government first. So COG kicks in, the government will start to take care of themselves right away. That's their main purpose, to take care of themselves.
What are your thoughts on if something like this does happen. And, you know, the United States is a vast amount of land from the East Coast to the West. We've talked about and seen over the years, a lot more recently, about states seceding from the Union. Do you think we'll be able to put the country back together as a whole, or do you think it'll end up coming into sections?
I think it'll break apart.
So
absolutely.
So Texas will become Texas, and do you think it'll follow natural boundaries?
Texas thinks that they're their own country still anyway. I mean, this is how they are. You know, I lived in Texas for a while. I mean, you gotta love them. I mean, they have a lot of pride. No, I think that absolutely, if they see that a non-response from the federal government, which I think there will be in some regards, not really, just because again the system gets overwhelmed. You know, removing any kind of tinfoil hat here and removing conspiracy theories, there will definitely be some in the federal government that'll try to do what they can to have things function. But the thing is they'll be overwhelmed. They won't be able to help everyone. They're going to be trying to feed 300 plus million people. And the country will have fallen into chaos and mob rule, and large swaths of the major cities will have collapsed with gangs. It just will be too much. And I think certain states will see opportunities like, listen, they're not helping us. Why don't we just help ourselves and close our own borders off? And then there'll be other little things that'll spring up out of the collapse. So and some of it will be hard to tell why a state will say we're out.
Do you think it'll follow more natural boundaries, or do you think it'll stay with the state lines the way they are now?
Well, some will be state lines. Some will just be states coming together and creating their own federations, their own unions themselves, little partnerships. I mean, that's how I'm having the book unfold at the same time, because I think it's a very real, natural, organic way. Because if you look at the nation in itself, we're a nation, but there's really not, in some regards, there's not some things that really hold us together except that we call ourselves Americans. And there's been for decades now forces that have been telling us we're not Americans, we're Black Americans, we're Asian Americans, we're always hyphenated Americans. So then when you're hyphenated American, it's easy to just break away.
Do you think we'll segregate the country?
You mean along racial lines?
Yeah.
I don't know if that necessarily will happen. I think in summary, I think, no, I don't necessarily think you'll have a white America. I don't think that, or a Black America. I don't think that would happen. Not to say there couldn't be certain towns or, you know, that could go along that line, but an entire nation, I don't think that's who we are overall as a people anymore. And I think when you have something that's post-grid, I could care less if what they look like.
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about if you're lazy or not.
Absolutely. And I think that's how most Americans, or most
definitely.
people are. Yeah, that's not to say you're not going to have some people out there that are racially motivated like that aren't going to want to create their quote unquote type, racially divided or segregated, city or state. Yeah, I think that of course you can have people like that, but I don't think they would prevail.
If you could choose one place to live during something like this, and I'm not talking about, we talked about where the capital would be moved and what made sense there, but you personally, to survive something like this, where would you choose?
Pacific Northwest.
So Oregon, Washington, Utah? Idaho? Yeah. What makes you be drawn there, considering everything that we've read recently about Yellowstone and all that kind of stuff?
Well, the thing about the supervolcano is, if that happens, it really doesn't matter where you are.
That's true.
If that thing goes, we're pretty much gone anyway.
Oh no, I'm in Indiana. I'll be fine.
If that thing goes, we got other things to worry about.
Yeah, don't worry about
Actually, I think I'd probably rather be in Idaho if that goes, because that's just going to be hell on earth.
You'll be one of the first ones gone.
We'll be gone. We just listen. What was that? Gone.
So what do you have got? What do you got going on here in the near future?
So right now I'm working on book 4. Is in rewrites right now, so people can expect book 4 out in the winter. I'm trying to hopefully we'll be able to get it out by Christmas time.
Yes, and remember to send me Valium, because I'm,
Well, I've told you, already that Sanctuary was that's like light reading.
Well, I'll say when I picked up Sanctuary to read it, and it's a little slow through the first third of the book. You're kind of laying the groundwork for things, but man, you hit about a third of the way through, and it's just non-stop from there on. And it's like I put the book down and I needed to go take a shower, and it's like, oh my goodness. And then you and I talked, and it's like, oh, it's going to ramp up from there, and it's like, I don't know if I can deal with it. I'm not going to have
it really picks up, and it's that's what I do with book 3. It's about the overall story arc and drawing people in and making, and the thing is that eventually that the story ends in the year 2066, because I give you the readers the prologues in the epilogues where there's a woman, Haley, the little girl obviously survives, and she's the one telling the story, so eventually it ends up in a hopeful place. But in order to get there, there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of agony and turmoil and pain, emotional pain and loss that happens along the way.
And it sucks us in like a void. I can tell you that. It's like even Sanctuary, by the end of it, I had to take a step back, and it's like conflicted in a novel. It's like, what would you do? When you look at the characters and what they're going through, is it stuff that you've actually thought about in your own life between your spouse and yourself? And I'm not going to give away what went on, but I mean, you really have to take a step back and evaluate.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, a lot of things will happen, and I don't want to give any spoilers away with what happens, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, I quite honestly, I'm glad he's just a character, because if he was really a real life person, I'd probably beat him, But, Eddie and I sat down afterwards, and he hasn't read the book, and I'm like, what would you do if this happened? Or what would you do if this happened? And, how would you? And it's like, then you bring in all of the moral and ethical issues involved with that, and your religious beliefs and everything else. And it's like, what would you do after this? And it's like, oh my God, and even for those of us that live this stuff and bleed this stuff all the time, it's still.
But the thing is, what we're living right now, though, isn't, and those events that would occur, though, those things are completely different. We're preparing for something like that. And then there's the actual
emotion
thing.
The human part of it.
Yeah, and what's happening with Gordon and the connection he has with that character. It's born out of because it picks up, that they've been traveling now for weeks, and they've been going through their own life and death scenarios and fighting people, and things have been happening to them. Things like that, life and death things, when you're with somebody, it bonds you to that person.
Yeah, a natural connection.
It creates you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an intimate one. It doesn't, but you now all of a sudden look at that person completely differently. And it happens that's where the term brothers in arms comes from. It's where you're with this other man or these other men, and you're fighting, and you look at them as brothers because you're connected by that combat, that experience. And the same thing is happening with Gordon and this woman and this child on the road, is because they're experiencing these things together, and it brings them together in a way that it would be, they're not really friends. They're something else, but they're also not intimate, but there's something else that's being forged because they're surviving together.
Yeah, but
killing. What's that?
As an outside, you almost, as a spouse to one of them, you're almost now forced into an outside relationship, and dealing with the emotional part of that is a little intense, because now you're not part of, as humans. And in dealing with any kind of downgrade, we always have to be part of a clique. It's just how we run. We're pack animals,
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with a whole nother level of emotions that a lot of people aren't ready to deal with. And that's what I love about your books.
Something I'm going to be having in other books, and this is something that's interesting that people need to think about, and this pertains to men. Women sometimes will have a natural reaction to want to be drawn to whatever is the alpha male, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are men out there that don't have the ability to, and I'm not meaning this in a sexual way, but perform, meaning know how to take care of situations or take care of their family, it can be a natural tendency for some women to look at there's like, well, he's not really the guy that's going to take care of me. It's a post-grid. It's all about survival. You know, Bob over here, he's got it pretty squared away. He can take care of me. I can survive with him.
Yeah.
And these are things that could happen.
Yeah.
And you can have someone who's married and the guy's a nice enough guy, but if he can't keep his family, she might go, I need to go where I know my kids will live.
And don't forget, people aren't going to be themselves in their nice little comfy world. Try not to take, and this is my pet peeve, but try not to take a shower for a week and see how it changes you emotionally. Just that. Now add into that the fact that you're hungry. On top of it, your whole emotional being changes, whether you want it to or not. So we are down to the last 3 minutes. Any closing words, how they can find your newest book? Now you're down to, the first book is called The End, the second is The Long Road, and today releases Sanctuary. And the whole series is called The New World series. Now you also have a deck of conflicted cards that plays along with the books, the first 2 books. How will anybody find your website? The giveaway that you're doing?
Yeah, okay, so you can go to www.gmichaelhopf.com, and there you can find anywhere the books are located. There's links on there that takes you to online retailers. You can also go into any brick and mortar physical store like a Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, Hastings, depending where you live, and you should be able to find any of the books in there. The giveaway, the best thing to do is go to my Facebook page, and there I have it listed, and I'm just, it's obviously I'm trying to drive to get some reviews up for the book. So I've got a giveaway where I'm giving away 2 iPod shuffles to two random people that make a review on Amazon for the book Sanctuary. But I'll also need you to go ahead and send me an email and let me know you've done that, so I keep tabs on everybody.
And yeah, your email address, can you spell it out?
Yes, GEOFF @GMichaelHopf, Hopf is spelled HOPF.com.